would be approximately $1,500 for the book, the dust jacket, the box, the doll,
Sorry.
and of course the all-important autograph.
It's nowhere near what I paid. I'm very surprised.
Be honest. If you found one of these strange objects at a flea market or in your attic, would you even keep it? Most people wouldn't. Some look like broken machines. Others resemble odd toys, medical tools, or things with no obvious purpose at all. Yet on Antiques Roadshow, these bizarre finds shocked everyone by turning into some of the most valuable treasures ever appraised. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're counting down the weirdest treasures worth millions on Antiques Roadshow. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible hidden treasure discoveries. Not every object on Roadshow shocks people with a value in the thousands. Some pieces grab attention because of one simple question: how has this even survived? These two chocolate figures are exactly that kind of find. One is Tommy Atkins, the other is an ambulance nurse, both connected to the First World War. Chocolate is meant to be eaten. It melts, breaks down, spoils, or simply disappears. But somehow, after more than a century, these figures have kept their shape.
Chocolate Tommy Atkins, number 6971, and I've got ambulance nurse. And they've survived intact.
That's right, yes.
And where did you get them from?
I got late godmother. She died in September, and I've been clearing her house out.
Right.
And I've been told they're about 1920s.
Well, they're made by Pascal's, London.
They were found while clearing out the house of the owner's late godmother. At first, they sound like small objects hidden among family memories. But the expert immediately understands that these are not just old sweets. They belong to a time when even chocolate could carry a patriotic message, bought in support of soldiers and those serving during the war.
And I have seen one or two of these before, but never in complete condition. Now, I mean, this is very unusual survival, really. If you were patriotic in the First World War, you would have bought these chocolates in support of the troops.
What makes them both charming and slightly creepy is that contrast. These are not porcelain figures, they are not metal keepsakes, they are chocolate, something created to vanish. Yet, these two tiny figures have survived almost like they were frozen in time. And of course, there is one thing the expert has to make clear: they are definitely not something anyone should eat.
What would somebody pay in a sale for them? Probably somebody would pay for the two £50 to £100, something like that.
Right. Okay.
And good
Very
fun,
much.
though.
Yes, that's right.
Around £50 to £100 for the pair. The number is not huge, but this case is still unforgettable, because sometimes the value is not only in the money, it is in the strange survival of a small object that should never have lasted this long. First World War, chocolate still shaped like human figures, funny, unsettling, and a tiny piece of everyday history that somehow refused to disappear.
I brought a sterling silver teapot.
And where did you get it?
In my hometown of New Haven. I was walking home from school with my dad one day, and we came across a box that said free. And what appealed to me about this item is that it had a G on it, which is the first letter of my name. And it looked interesting, like it had history.
But what she didn't know that day was that the object she picked up was not just an old piece with an interesting appearance. Hidden behind this small pot left on the side of the road was the story of a silver object that had survived for more than a century. When the expert began examining it, the first discovery was its true purpose. It was not actually a teapot, as the owner had always believed. It was a Demitasse pot, a smaller vessel designed for serving coffee. And the clues were hidden in details that most people would easily overlook. The longer spout, the filtering structure inside, and the carefully designed handle all showed that this was not simply created as a decorative object. It was made to be used. The silversmiths behind it had considered everything from how the coffee would pour, to how heat would move through the piece, and how someone would hold it comfortably. But the most important clue was found underneath. The word sterling confirmed that it was sterling silver, made with 92.5% pure silver. And the other marks revealed even more about where it came from. The laurel wreath and sword mark connected the piece to Wilcox and Wagoner, a silver company based in New York. Later, the Watson Company began producing hollowware for the brand and continued using that mark for many years. Those small details allowed the expert to trace the Demitasse pot back to the early 20th century. And the most surprising part was how different its journey had been compared to many other antique silver pieces. A lot of sterling silver objects were carefully preserved, passed through families, or protected as valuable collectibles. But this little pot was left in a free box, where anyone could have walked past without noticing. Maybe someone didn't realize it was real silver. Maybe they never looked closely enough at the marks underneath. But one moment of curiosity was enough to save a piece of history from being forgotten.
At auction, it would probably be estimated in a range of like $250 to $350 for auction.
Wow. Wow. For something I found on the side of the road, that's amazing.
I hope you find some more stuff on the side of the road.
Yeah, thank you.
The value of this Demitasse pot may not be a shocking number compared to some other discoveries. But what makes the story special is where it began. An object once placed in a box marked free was finally recognized as a small piece of American silver history. And sometimes the things people leave behind are not worthless at all. They are simply waiting for someone to stop, look closer, and discover the story that was hidden there all along.
She loved them and she wore them every Saturday night. Dark hair, dark eyes, red lips, red fingernails, and she was always dressed in black. So they, to me, mean good.
For the owner, these dress clips were first and foremost a keepsake connected to her mother's image and personal style. But behind the jewelry she wore on those Saturday nights was a name that could completely change its value. As the appraiser examined them, each detail from the materials and design to their origin showed that these were not ordinary decorative clips.
They are platinum, diamond, Cartier clips. What's great about jewelry from this period, and I would date these to around about 1930. These are signed Cartier. They also have a serial number.
The Cartier signature and serial number confirm the quality of the piece. Around 1930, Cartier was at the height of the Art Deco era, creating refined geometric designs and using platinum to build delicate structures strong enough to hold diamonds. However, what impressed the appraiser most was the quality of the stones.
Altogether, you have about 20 carats of diamonds. The two large center stones are each about 2 carats. They are the height of quality. They're incredibly luscious and sparkly and well matched.
With around 20 carats of diamonds, combined with Cartier's Art Deco design and exceptional craftsmanship, the clips became a truly special piece of jewelry. Their value came not only from the amount of diamonds, but from how they were selected, arranged, and finished.
Conservatively, I would say an auction estimate on the pair would be in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $50,000.
Wow.
They truly are museum pieces.
That surprises me.
From a piece of jewelry connected to memories of her mother, these dress clips turned out to be a genuine Cartier Art Deco creation. Beyond their value of tens of thousands of dollars, they represent one of the most important periods in the history of fine jewelry.
If someone told you a small cannon once made a horse go deaf, your first reaction would probably be that it was just another family story passed down through generations. But with the next artifact, that's exactly how the story begins. A tiny cannon, a family memory more than a century old, and a truth even more surprising than the story itself.
I've been told that it was shot off by my grandfather on our farm in Maine, and it made the horse go deaf.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It certainly sounds hard to believe, but within minutes, the expert confirmed that this was no toy. It was an authentic Winchester signal cannon, built for one purpose: to produce an explosion loud enough to get everyone's attention.
It's a signal cannon, and you put in a standard 10-gauge blank shotgun shell. The cannon actually on top says "not for ball."
The manufacturer even engraved a warning directly onto the barrel, reminding owners never to load it with a real projectile. That alone says a lot about how powerful this little cannon could be. But if it wasn't designed for combat, what exactly was it made to do?
And they would generally be used for salute cannons, the beginning of races, anything where you needed a loud bang. This is their model 1898 signal cannon.
In the late 19th century, long before electronic sirens and public address systems, a single cannon blast was often the quickest way to announce that an event had begun. From horse races to ceremonial celebrations, That was the role of the Winchester Model 1898. It may not be the rarest model Winchester ever produced, but it remains a fascinating piece of the company's history.
They made about 18,000 of them in total.
Roughly 18,000 were manufactured. Not an exceptionally small number. Yet after more than 100 years, very few have survived in the kind of condition seen here. So just how much difference would that make?
I would estimate at auction it would bring around $600 to $800.
Oh, wow, that's very nice.
Yeah.
An auction estimate of around $600 to $800. Not the biggest valuation in today's countdown. But sometimes the most memorable part of an artifact isn't the price. It's the remarkable story that has stayed with it for more than a century. And after a signal cannon remembered for deafening a horse, our next story shifts to a collection that reflects the extraordinary courage of a real-life hero.
It's an inkstand that's been handed down in my family for several generations. My mother gave it to me.
It's been in your family for a very long time,
Oh, yes.
at least since
probably
the
6 or 7 generations.
Yeah. It's not strictly speaking an inkstand.
But what the family didn't realize was that the object passed down for all those generations was actually telling a slightly different story. Over time, the original purpose of antique objects can slowly disappear. Names change, memories fade, and sometimes an item is remembered as something completely different from what it was created to be. When the expert examined it more closely, he discovered that this was not simply an inkstand. It was part of an 18th century desk set, consisting of a Pounce pot and a nib wipe, two objects connected to a time when every letter had to be written carefully by hand. More than 200 years ago, writing was a much slower process than it is today. After ink touched the paper, people could not always immediately fold the page and send it away. That was where a Pounce pot became useful. A small object that might seem almost forgotten today was once part of the everyday process of communication. But the most interesting part was not only what it was used for, it was when and how it was made. The piece dates to around 1770 to 1780, during the Georgian period in England, a time known for balanced, elegant, and carefully crafted designs. Instead of relying on size or dramatic decoration, its beauty came from smaller details, the delicate openwork, the proportions, and the attention given to the overall form. Another unusual clue was its small size, which led the expert to believe that it may have once belonged on a woman's writing desk. But there was also one detail that could easily be misunderstood. Despite its silver appearance, this was not solid silver. It was old Sheffield plate, an important 18th century technique developed before modern electroplating existed. By bonding a layer of silver over another metal, craftsmen could create objects with the appearance and elegance of silver while making them more accessible than solid silver pieces. So the real value of this object was never only about the metal itself. It came from its age, craftsmanship, and the small piece of everyday history it managed to preserve.
I think that, again, the market for old Sheffield plate isn't as strong as it perhaps used to be. The appreciation for it isn't amongst the younger collectors necessarily there quite as much, unfortunately. But notwithstanding, I think at auction it should be worth something $600 to $800, something like that. Yeah.
Very nice.
And the item that generations remembered as an inkstand finally revealed the real story. It had been carrying a small reminder of how people once lived, worked, and connected with each other.
Well, I brought in a clock, and it was in my great aunt's home as far along as I can remember, and I don't know a whole lot about it.
This is called a novelty clock. It was made by the Oswald company, German company. They made several different forms of novelty clocks with carved wooden cases.
Novelty clocks were created with a very different purpose from traditional timepieces. They were not designed simply to measure time. They were also decorative objects meant to bring personality, creativity, and a sense of fun into everyday spaces. Instead of the formal wooden cases commonly seen on many household clocks, manufacturers began experimenting with animals, characters, and unusual designs that could immediately catch someone's attention. Oswald Company became especially known for this style of carved wooden clock. Their creations often transformed ordinary clocks into playful figures, including owls, Scotty dogs, and many other imaginative forms. Many of these pieces eventually reached the American market, where buyers were drawn to objects that combined practical function with a unique decorative appearance. But what made this particular clock unusual was something even the experts could not immediately answer. The carved figure had certain features that resembled a dog, yet other details looked closer to a fox. Instead of making it less interesting, that uncertainty became one of the reasons the piece stood out. In the collecting world, mystery can sometimes be just as important as beauty. Common models usually have auction records, reference examples, and a clear history that experts can compare. But when a design almost never appears anywhere else, it begins to attract the attention of collectors searching for something they may never encounter again. Another fascinating detail is the way the clock tells time. Rather than using traditional hour and minute hands, the character's eyes rotate to display the time. It is a simple idea, but it perfectly captures the spirit behind novelty clocks, turning an everyday object into something memorable every time someone looks at it. For pieces like this, value does not come from a complicated mechanism or expensive materials. What matters most is rarity, originality, and whether the object tells a story that very few others can.
This one, I talked it over with my colleagues. We felt that if the stars were all in alignment, in a good clock auction, maybe you have a couple of collectors that really wanted it, we felt that it could easily bring $1,000 to $1,200.
Wow, amazing. Who would have thought the old dog was, wow.
At first glance, this looks more like a collection of odd curiosities than valuable collectibles. Illustrated books, cloth dolls, tarot cards, and posters all reflect the unmistakably dark imagination of Edward Gorey. Yet these unusual pieces have become highly sought after by collectors, making even the most unconventional items surprisingly desirable.
I've been collecting for many years. This is a sampling of diverse items that I have. A lot of things that I collect are signed and or numbered, including the doll.
Your collection showcases the vastness of what Edward Gorey really did and how truly macabre his mind was.
The guest didn't acquire this collection all at once. Over the years, she carefully added one piece at a time, focusing on signed and numbered editions whenever she found them. Edward Gorey's distinctive blend of Gothic illustration and dark humor has earned him a devoted following, and nearly everything he created has become collectible. Among all the items on display, however, the appraiser was immediately drawn to two small dolls.
I was most caught by the two dolls you brought here today. This one's named Fig Bash, and it's a hand-designed Gorey doll, and it states that it's filled with rice.
Yes.
And you mentioned you have a lot of signed items here, which you do. And here we have Edward Gorey's trademark signature, where he invariably crosses out his name and then signs underneath the crossed-out name.
These dolls weren't made from precious materials, but they have become remarkably difficult to find because so few have survived complete. Gorey's distinctive habit of crossing out his printed name before signing underneath also makes authentic examples especially appealing to collectors. Even so, the true centerpiece of the collection wasn't Fig Bash.
The other doll is a Bah Humbug, and he came with the limited edition signed numbered book.
Which you also have. The books are rare and collectible in their own rights, but the dolls, particularly since Mr. Gorey's passing, have become very, very difficult to find and have escalated in value.
Bah Humbug was originally issued as part of a limited edition set that included the book, the box, and Gorey's signature. Complete sets like this have become increasingly scarce over the years because their individual pieces are often separated or lost. Keeping every original component together has significantly increased its value and reflects Gorey's unique approach to turning books into complete works of art rather than simply something to read.
I think the headless bust here with the Bah Humbug doll could be the centerpiece of your collection, and I would estimate that its value at retail would be approximately $1,500 for the book, the dust jacket, the box, the doll,
Sorry.
and of course the all-important autograph.
It's nowhere near what I paid. I'm very surprised.
The estimated $1,500 value applies to the complete package: the book, dust jacket, box, doll, and Edward Gorey's signature. It is the completeness of the set that makes it so valuable. Even more impressive, this represents only a small sample of the guest's collection. the items brought to the roadshow alone were estimated to be worth more than $5,000, proving that some of the strangest creations can become the most treasured collectibles. If one old doll is enough to make some people uneasy, then a doll with several heads takes that feeling to another level. This case begins with exactly that strange idea. One body, multiple heads, each with a different hairstyle, expression, and personality. For the owner, as a child, it was not just one doll. It felt like 4 dolls inside the same box.
Well, I've heard of multiple personalities, but this really does take the biscuit, doesn't it?
Well, no, I liked it. I was rather fascinated by it. And I did used to put the different heads on from time to time.
Yes, because
it's like having 4 dolls.
The concept is clever, but also a little unsettling. Change the head, and the whole character changes. One head had sleeping eyes, another had short hair, another had blonde curls, and another had braids. But for the expert, the real key was not just the number of heads. It was the maker's marks and the original box.
She is made of bisque, or the heads are made of bisque, because it says here Germany and the number 174. It actually says Kästner, and Kästner will be or is the name of the manufacturer.
Kästner is an important name in the world of German dolls, and like many valuable doll cases, the connection to Thuringia gives the story more weight. But the maker is only part of it. What makes this set stand out is that it is still in its original case, with the label, and in condition so good the expert can hardly believe it was ever played with.
And Thuringia was the great doll-making area of Germany in the 19th century. In its original case, with the label still there, almost unplayed with. Now,
I did used to play with it.
You were obviously incredibly careful. Date.
That is the sweetest twist in this case. The owner really did play with it, changing the heads from time to time, yet kept it carefully enough that more than a century later, almost everything was still complete. And in collectibles, complete can be the difference between an ordinary item and one worth chasing.
And I would have said that the doll herself, just as she comes, would be worth perhaps £300 or £400. But with the other heads and the fact that she's complete in her original box, I would have thought we're talking about more like £1,500.
One doll on its own might be worth only a few £100s, but with the extra heads, the original box, the label, and a nearly complete condition, the value rises to around £1,500. This case is not a 6-figure shock, but it proves a very real rule. The more original and complete a collectible is, the more its value can change. Some old dolls look sweet, but others become unsettling before they even move, simply because of where they were kept. This mechanical doll spent years hidden deep inside a dark, cluttered cupboard. And in the owner's childhood memory, it only came out once a year, when her grandmother would wind it up and let it do its thing.
Well, she's been in the family all my life. She belonged to my grandmother, and she used to be kept in the back of a very dark, very cluttered cupboard.
Yes.
And as a treat once a year, if my sister and I really played our cards right, she would be brought out, and my grandmother would wind her up.
And she'd do her thing.
It sounds like a slightly creepy childhood memory, but to the expert, that dark cupboard may have been the reason the doll survived at all. The silk dress had started to deteriorate, as expected after more than a century, but it was still preserved enough to tell the story of its age.
She's dressed beautifully in this silk, which is... It's deteriorating, but it's inevitable. When you think that she was probably made in around 1890, 1900, the fact that your grandmother very cleverly kept her at the back of a cupboard, I'm sure it was nothing to do with keeping her out of your way. She merely wanted to conserve the fabric. And in fact, that has, I'm sure, helped. You can see it's beginning just to go into tatters here.
And this was not just a doll standing still. Beneath it was a velvet-covered box holding the music, cams, cogs, and the whole mechanism that allowed it to move. When the expert turned it around, the small marks on the back of the head began to reveal its real origin.
And there is the letters SH and the number 1300. So in fact, that tells me that she was made by a company called Simon and Halbig.
But the best twist was not the maker's mark. It was the doll's true purpose. People often think dolls were made for children, but a complex automaton like this was not a child's toy. It was created for adults, as after-dinner entertainment for wealthy households. In other words, this strange doll that fascinated children from inside a dark cupboard was actually a luxury mechanical entertainment piece.
They weren't for children at all. They were actually made for adults as after-dinner entertainment pieces, really, a sort of rich man's plaything in a way. They were originally made in Paris, and there were a number of top makers, and she was made by Leopold Lambert.
With automatons, the more movement they have, the more valuable they tend to be. This doll had a tambourine, head movement, and several different actions, and those details pushed its value to around £1,800 to just over £2,000.
And I think that if she came up for auction, we'd be talking about perhaps a figure of between £1,800 and perhaps just over £2,000.
Very good.
Some forgotten objects spend decades in an attic. Others sit untouched in a garage or a basement. But the next item was left inside a toolbox because everyone in the family believed it was nothing more than an old mechanical tool. That simple misunderstanding almost led to a mistake no one saw coming.
This used to be my great-grandfather's, and my grandfather inherited it. He didn't know what it was, so he thought it was a tool.
For years, it sat among wrenches, screwdrivers, and other ordinary tools. No one ever imagined it was a firearm. That only changed after the family began sorting through their grandfather's belongings following his passing.
We were going through his things, and my other grandfather pulled it out, and he wasn't sure what it was and started to suppress it, and my father said, "Don't do that."
A single warning came just in time, because the tiny object in his hand was in fact a gun, not an ordinary pistol. It was a palm pistol, one of the most unusual firearm designs of the late 19th century.
It's a pretty cool little gun, and it's really a novelty, made by the Chicago Arms Company.
At first glance, it's hard to believe this was ever designed for personal protection. It doesn't resemble a conventional handgun. There is no traditional grip, no familiar trigger. Everything about it was engineered to fit neatly into the palm of the user's hand, and its firing mechanism was even more unconventional.
So it operated with a rotary system inside, and we have 7 chambers.
Instead of pulling a trigger with one finger, the shooter simply squeezed the entire grip. It was a remarkably bold idea for the late 1800s. That unusual design is exactly what makes palm pistols so desirable to collectors today, especially since relatively few examples have survived the passage of time.
Condition is everything with guns. This has got most of the original finish. A gun like this would retail at a gun show easily $2,000.
Wow.
Around $2,000 for an object the family had long mistaken for an ordinary tool. That's exactly why stories like this continue to fascinate Antiques Roadshow viewers. Because sometimes the most valuable treasure in the house is the one nobody ever thought was worth a second look. Many American families still keep the items their fathers or grandfathers brought home after World War II. Most of them are simply remembered as wartime souvenirs. But every now and then, one of those souvenirs turns out to be far older than the war that brought it back. And that's exactly the story behind this pistol.
I got it from my dad. He brought it back from Germany or Austria when he was in World War II.
Like countless other veterans, the owner's father returned home with this firearm after the war. What makes the story even more interesting is that the family still has the official document signed by his commanding officer, authorizing him to bring it back to the United States. Because of that, the pistol's journey is unusually well documented. Its true origin, however, was something no one expected.
You actually have a piece of paper signed by his commanding officer saying that it was okay. Well, it's a German pistol, and it was made in the mid-18th century.
The mid-18th century. That means this pistol was already more than 250 years old. It didn't belong to World War II. It simply passed through that conflict before eventually becoming a family keepsake in America. And that was only the first surprise.
And one of the ideas was to have, if you cock the hammer back, there's a little release here, and the barrels turn over.
At the time, gunsmiths were searching for a solution to one of the biggest problems every soldier faced. How could they fire more than one shot before reloading? This pistol offered an ingenious answer. Its rotating barrel mechanism gave the shooter an immediate second shot with just a few simple movements.
And one of the ideas was to have, so now you would be able to have 4 shots instead of 2.
It was an idea well ahead of its time. But history came with a trade-off. During the 19th century, the pistol was converted from its original flintlock system to percussion. The modification once made it more practical to use. Today, however, it reduces its appeal to serious collectors.
At auction, I would figure it would sell for about $2,000 to $4,000.
Really?
Yeah. If it was original flintlock, it would be at least double that.
Oh, wow.
Even so, an auction value of $2,000 to $4,000 was enough to surprise the owner. But the most memorable part of this story wasn't the valuation. It was the extraordinary journey of a pistol that survived for more than 2 centuries, passed through multiple eras and a world war, and ultimately arrived on Antiques Roadshow as a remarkable witness to history. Who would ever expect a doll found beside a dustbin to become the most valuable piece in the group? This story begins in the simplest way. A doll collector placed an advert in the paper and then received a call from a woman who said she had a doll sitting by the side of the dustbin. It sounded like something nobody wanted, but that almost discarded object was about to deliver a major twist, the kind that makes people look twice at every forgotten box and every old attic shelf.
I put an advert in the paper because I collect 1 or 2 dolls, and a lady saw my ad. She rang me and said, "I think I've got a doll in by the side of the dustbin."
What?
When the expert began examining it, he quickly realized this was not an ordinary doll. It was a Bébé by Jumeau, one of the great names in 19th century French doll making.
Well, this little doll is, I'm sure you know, is known as a Bébé. It's by the famous doll maker Jumeau, Jumeau, who was one of the top 5 doll makers in France in around 1860.
Then the small details started to speak. The hand-cut almond eyes, the little line of white bisque between the lips, the number mark on the back of the neck, and the Jumeau mark on the body. To most people, it was just an old doll. To the expert, every detail was evidence that this piece was far rarer than it first appeared.
And I'm going to do this because she's got a mark on her bottom, which shows that she's by Jumeau, Médaille d'Or, Paris.
But the expert was not finished. After comparing it with the other doll beside it, he returned to the main piece and made the key point very clear. This one was a rarity.
But this one is a rarity, and I think you'll find she's probably worth as much as £5,000.
I was told about £800. I thought that was good.
From £26 to £5,000. A doll that was almost left beside a dustbin turned out to be a Jumeau treasure. And that is exactly what makes finds like this so addictive. Sometimes the object someone is ready to throw away is the very thing collectors would pay a fortune to own. Some questions are enough to pull viewers closer to the screen the moment they are asked. What is in the box? And in this case, the answer is not jewelry, historical papers, or a rare piece of pottery. Inside the box is a plaster head, real human hair, real human eyelashes, and a fake hand so strange and unsettling that it is almost impossible to look away.
Inside the box, we found this wonderful plaster head with human hair, human eyelashes, and a strangely realistic human hand. What can you tell us about the contents of the box?
I don't know if anyone has heard of Willie Sutton. He was a famous bank robber, well-known bank robber. He was also well-known for breaking out of prisons. This was his that he used in an attempted breakout.
Willie Sutton was not only famous for robbing banks, he was also famous for escaping from prison, and the head in this box was not some bizarre decoration. It was part of a failed prison break plan, a dummy head and a dummy hand, placed in a bed to fool the guards into thinking Sutton was still lying there. In this case, provenance is everything. Without the story of the owner's grandfather working at the prison, and without the box and its label, this might only be a creepy plaster head. But once it is connected to Willie Sutton, it becomes a real crime artifact. Hair from the prison barber shop, real eyelashes, a head made inside prison with a hand arranged as if it were gripping the edge of a bedsheet. The more the story unfolds, the creepier the object becomes, because it is not just a prop, it was once part of a real escape attempt.
And after conferring with my colleagues, we were able to give it a very conservative auction estimate of $2,500 to $3,500.
Wow, that's nice. That's very nice. That's surprising.
As far as I know, this is the first head in the box we've had on Roadshow.
$2,500 to $3,500 for the first head in a box on Roadshow. This may be one of the creepiest cases in the entire video, not simply because it is a fake head, but because it was a real fake head used in a real prison escape attempt by a real bank robber. Not every flea market purchase is worth only a few dollars. This sideboard was originally bought simply because the family needed a practical piece of furniture. For a time, it even served as a changing table for their first baby. Years later, however, that familiar cabinet would reveal a story no one in the family had ever expected.
This is a piece that I purchased at a flea market in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota in about 1969 or 1970. And we bought it so that we would have a change table for our firstborn baby. I have pictures of my daughter at 6 months sitting in a bathtub on top of this buffet.
From the very first details, the appraiser recognized that this was no ordinary sideboard. It reflected the craftsman style of Gustav STICKLEY, one of the leading figures behind America's arts and crafts movement in the early 20th century. His furniture became known for its clean lines, natural materials, and outstanding craftsmanship rather than elaborate decoration. But the detail that confirmed the cabinet's true identity came from something the owner had discovered only shortly before bringing it to the show.
This antique dealer down there had several buffets of different types, and he wanted to clean out his antique store because they were taking up so much room, so he said that we could have any one we wanted for $25.
The original paper label on the back confirmed that the sideboard had been produced by CRAFTSMAN, a STICKLEY company, sometime between 1905 and 1910. That small piece of paper established its origin and made the cabinet far more significant to collectors. Even so, it was not the feature that impressed the appraiser the most. What truly stood out was how well the piece had survived after more than a century.
That's a really good way to look at the finish and have a sense of whether it's original or not. If I were to see this come up for auction today, I would expect to see an auction estimate of between around about $3,000 and $5,000.
Its remarkably original finish allowed this STICKLEY Craftsman sideboard to retain much of its character after more than 100 years. For collectors, originality is often far more valuable than heavy restoration. Purchased at a flea market for just $25, the cabinet is now estimated at $3,000 to $5,000. It is a perfect reminder that some of the most memorable treasures on Antiques Roadshow began as ordinary pieces of everyday family furniture. If you came across a sword that had been stuck inside its scabbard for more than 150 years, your first assumption would probably be that it had simply been damaged beyond repair. But this sword wasn't ruined by age. It was locked in place by a single moment that unfolded on a Civil War battlefield. A moment that may have saved the life of the man carrying it.
I brought my great-great-grandfather's Civil War sword.
Alongside the sword was a letter sent home near the end of 1863. That letter transformed this object from a military relic into a first-hand witness to history. But that wasn't the most surprising part.
It hit that scabbard so hard, it drove the scabbard into the sword, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot pull that sword out of there.
According to the soldier, a bullet struck the sword while it was still inside the scabbard. The impact was so powerful that it distorted the entire structure. And from that day forward, the sword was never drawn again.
He writes home from Raccoon Mountain, Georgia on December 3rd, 1863. and he writes home that a ball, meaning a bullet, hit my sword while in the scabbard. I cannot get the sword out. I will send it home to you.
Then the expert noticed something even stranger. The soldier had inserted the sword into the scabbard backwards, a mistake that would be almost impossible under normal circumstances. That could only mean one thing. Everything around him must have been complete chaos. What could have been happening that was so frantic, so desperate, that a trained soldier shoved his sword into its scabbard the wrong way?
Something was going on crazy around him because he put the sword in backwards. Then it was hit. It probably saved at least his leg.
And then the bullet came. The massive dent is still there today. A scar that tells a life or death story more clearly than many history books ever could. Without that sword, the bullet might have gone straight into the soldier's body. But did that incredible story actually make the sword more valuable?
As a group, this is something that would need to be insured for about $5,000.
Wow.
About $5,000. Not the highest valuation on today's list. But very few artifacts can document the exact moment a human life may have been saved by nothing more than a piece of metal. And the next story will take us to an object created during wartime by a man who was living through that war himself.
Well, I remember my father buying it along with a lot of mess silver. I sold them because, quite honestly, insurances and everything else, it was too much. Yes. But I've always loved this.
Among the many silver pieces once owned by the family, this was the item the owner decided to keep. Not because she knew exactly how valuable it was, but simply because it had a special meaning to her. At first glance, it looked like a spoon warmer, a silver object once found on the dining tables of wealthy families. But after a closer inspection, the expert realized this piece had a completely different purpose.
My initial reaction is a spoon warmer.
And you get a big surprise when you open the lid.
This is it, because now, a money box?
Yes, a swear box on the table.
The surprise was that this was not just an object used for dining. A swear box was used to collect money whenever someone said something inappropriate or broke certain rules in a shared space. This turned the piece into a fascinating glimpse of Victorian social life, where even a small tradition could be represented through a carefully crafted silver object. But the biggest question was whether it was originally made this way.
Because normally if you get a spoon warmer of this form, which there are many around,
yes,
they're electroplated. This is silver.
Yeah.
But there's another surprise, because it's Irish silver.
Really?
Here we are, it's Dublin, 1866.
Right.
The hallmarks on the silver revealed the true origin of the piece. Unlike many similar spoon warmers that were only electroplated, this object was made from real silver and identified as Irish silver from Dublin in 1866. These marks act like a historical record, helping reveal when and where an antique silver piece was created. The original design confirmed that it was not a modified spoon warmer, but a rare silver swear box made for this purpose.
Yes.
So, fascinating object. I have to say, I suggest you perhaps insure it for somewhere around $5,000.
Really?
From what seemed like a simple family silver object, this piece turned out to preserve a small part of 19th century social history. Its value came not only from the material or age, but also from the unusual story hidden behind its familiar appearance. The next case begins with a ring that looks completely different from ordinary jewelry. It was not created to represent romance. It was not designed to impress people with a large precious gemstone. Instead, it carries symbols that many people today might find unusual: a skeleton, time, and death. But that is exactly what makes this ring so special. Because in another period of history, jewelry was not only made for beauty, it could also be a way for people to preserve memories and remind themselves of how limited human life truly is.
It was left to my grandmother,
Yes.
and it was left by some ladies that she was friendly with, and they had connections with the Melville family in London, to do with theatre, I'm led to believe, something like that.
The family story behind this ring was no longer completely preserved. Only a few pieces of information remained about the people who once owned it and a vague connection to London. But the real secret was already hidden on the ring itself. This is a Memento Mori ring. The phrase means, remember that one day, everyone must die. It may sound dark, but centuries ago, this was a very familiar idea in European culture. Jewelry like this was not created simply to frighten people. It was created to remember those who had passed away and keep their memory alive. The ring is made from gold, decorated with black enamel, and covered with symbols of mortality. The skeleton, hourglass, crossed bones, and grave-digging tools all deliver the same message: time is always moving forward. But the most important detail is the inscription inside. It reveals that the ring was made in memory of Priscilla Wilkinson, who died in 1727 at the age of 78. Just one small inscription transformed this object from a general symbol of death into the story of a real person. For collectors, details like these are extremely important. They are not just looking for an old ring. They are looking for age, symbolism, condition, and a story that the object has managed to preserve for hundreds of years. That is why this ring is not valued by the weight of its gold. Its true value comes from the fact that it can still tell a story from almost 3 centuries ago.
And I think possibly if you put that into an auction, you could reasonably expect between £4,000 and £6,000 for it.
Right, okay. All right, thank you very much.
Almost 300 years after Priscilla Wilkinson passed away, her name is still preserved inside this small object. The people who once knew her may have disappeared long ago. But the ring continues to do exactly what it was created to do: preserve a memory. That is what makes Memento Mori jewelry so fascinating. The next case begins with a ring that looks like it came straight out of a secret story. It does not have a large gemstone at the center. It does not look like the classic jewelry pieces most people are used to seeing. Instead, it has a strange appearance, almost like a tiny creature hiding something. And for years, the family truly believed there was a mysterious story behind this ring. But on Antiques Roadshow, sometimes the legend is only the beginning. The more important question is what truth is actually hidden underneath that story.
My grandmother saw it in a jewelry store window in San Francisco in the early 1920s or before, and she was quite taken with it and she bought it. And she called it a poison dart ring, but apparently there are no darts involved.
How did she come to the idea that it's a poison dart ring?
It has a little hole in it through which...
The story of a poison dart ring immediately makes this piece fascinating. It sounds like the kind of secret ring that could appear in an old royal mystery. But the expert quickly confirms one thing: there are no hidden darts inside. However, once that layer of legend is removed, the ring reveals another kind of value. This is a piece of Renaissance Revival jewelry, not an actual Renaissance-era ring, but a creation designed to capture the spirit of that period. During the late 19th century, many craftsmen began looking back to the past for inspiration, using historic imagery, symbolic creatures, and traditional techniques to create highly artistic objects. And this ring clearly represents that idea. It is made from 18-karat gold and shaped like a salamander or a small creature, making it feel more like an object of curiosity than an ordinary ring. The rose-cut diamonds, table-cut diamonds, and enamel details all add to the antique feeling that the maker wanted to recreate. Even more interesting, the ring can actually open. Compartment rings like this were not necessarily made to hold poison. They could be used to keep small objects with personal meaning. But that hidden space is exactly what created its mystery and allowed people's imagination to continue for generations. So the value of this ring is not only about gold or diamonds. It comes from the unusual design, the craftsmanship, the family story, and a sense of mystery that very few pieces of jewelry can carry.
We feel that at auction, this ring would take an estimate in the range of $5,000 to $7,000.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's not for sale.
$5,000 to $7,000. Not for an actual poison dart ring, but for a piece carrying design history, craftsmanship, and a story memorable enough to survive through time. The response, "It's not for sale," also shows that this ring means far more than its appraisal value. The family legend may not have been completely accurate, but it kept this object alive through generations. And in the end, the truth behind it was still special in a different way. the ring did not need to hide something dangerous to become valuable. Because sometimes in the world of antiques, the most fascinating part is not whether every detail of a legend is true. It is what that legend helps us discover. If you placed 2 signed basketballs in front of most collectors and asked which one was worth more, many of them would probably get the answer wrong. That's exactly how this case begins. One basketball is connected to the Utah Jazz and one of the most famous periods in NBA history. The other carries the signature of Pete Maravich. At first glance, the choice seems obvious. But in the world of sports memorabilia, the most famous item is not always the most valuable one.
I actually had some friends that had acquired it from their parents, and they appreciated the value, but they didn't really want to haul it around.
And how did you get the Pete Maravich signed ball, Lauren?
My grandfather won it at a church raffle, and he wasn't a big sports fan, so I was the one that got it.
Neither basketball came from an auction house. Neither was purchased as a major collectible. One came through friends. The other came from a church raffle. The kinds of stories that rarely sound like the beginning of a hidden treasure. But as the experts looked more closely, they began focusing on what these basketballs actually represented.
Stockton hit a three-pointer with 40 seconds left. And, it tied the game, and the Bulls realized they had to do something. Jordan stole a pass, and the shot that you see all the time is him jumping up and hitting a 20-footer with just 5.2 seconds left and winning his 6th and final championship as a Bull.
It's one of the most replayed moments in basketball history, a game that virtually every NBA fan recognizes. For that reason alone, the Utah Jazz basketball carried obvious appeal. But as the appraisal continued, the story began moving in an unexpected direction. Because the memorabilia market doesn't always reward the most famous moment, sometimes it rewards the rarest survivor.
This basketball, I would probably insure it, Jason, for probably about $800. Now, the Maravich basketball, they're very, very rare. If I were insuring the Maravich ball, I would probably put a value of about $7,000.
Holy
$800 compared to $7,000, a gap large enough to leave the owner stunned. The basketball connected to a legendary NBA Finals wasn't the star of the story after all. The real star was the ball that had once been handed out as a prize at a small church raffle. It's exactly the kind of twist that makes sports memorabilia so fascinating. Fame may attract attention, but rarity is often what determines the final value. For generations, this painting has carried an unusual nickname within the family, the Scary Portrait. The 2 children staring directly at the viewer made more than one family member uneasy. As a child, the current owner didn't like being anywhere near it. But over time, the portrait transformed from something unsettling into one of the family's most treasured possessions, eventually earning a place in the dining room where everyone could see it.
This has been passed down for generations on my mother's side of the family, and she's from the East Coast, Providence, Newport, Rhode Island area. It's known as the Scary Portrait.
The identities of the 2 children have been lost over time, but the family's provenance tracing back to Providence and Newport, Rhode Island has remained intact. Based on the clothing and interior setting, the appraiser believes the portrait was painted sometime during the 1870s or 1880s. What truly sets the painting apart is that the artist made no attempt to hide the older sister's crutches. At a time when many families preferred idealized portraits of their children, including such a detail reflected acceptance and affection rather than an effort to conceal her disability.
This is a very finely painted portrait, and the children are just done beautifully. This is an oil on canvas. The parents chose to include the crutches and embrace the disability of the older sister. She's got her hands on her brother.
That is exactly why the portrait is regarded so highly within American folk art. Rather than simply recording 2 faces, the artist captured a touching family story. Although the painter's identity remains unknown, the confident handling of the faces, hands, and composition suggests someone with solid academic training. Its emotional subject matter and honest presentation make the work stand out among many family portraits from the same period.
It's just a fabulous thing, and a conservative auction estimate would be $6,000 to $8,000, And we think for insurance purposes, it probably would be around 15,000.
Wow, that's unbelievable. I love these kids.
As you should. I think they're wonderful.
These are my relatives.
The appraiser placed a conservative auction estimate of $6,000 to $8,000 on the painting, with an insurance value of around $15,000. Yet the numbers are only part of its story. Once remembered as the family's scary portrait, it has become a symbol of love and shared history. Behind those mysterious expressions is the moving story of two siblings and parents who chose to celebrate, rather than hide, their daughter. More than a century later, that honesty continues to resonate with everyone who stands before the painting. The next case begins with a ring that would be very easy to overlook. There is no large diamond at the center. No bright gemstone that immediately captures everyone's attention. And based on size alone, many people might assume this is just a small antique family ring. But sometimes, the smallest objects are hiding the biggest stories. Because the value of a ring does not always come from an expensive stone. Sometimes, it comes from history, meaning, and a background that is almost impossible to recreate.
Well, you know the expression rare as hen's teeth, don't you?
Yes.
You have brought me the mother of all hen's teeth here.
Really?
This is an extremely rare expression of jewelry.
When the expert used a comparison like that, he was not simply talking about a beautiful object. He was talking about something incredibly difficult to find. At first glance, this might look like a small gold ring with a garnet, but the real secret was hidden in the details most people would never notice. There are 10 small beads around the ring, and they were not created just for decoration. This is a decade ring, a miniature form of a rosary, where each bead represents a prayer and a religious tradition. It is both a piece of jewelry and an object connected to personal faith. The ring is made from 22-karat gold and features a cabochon garnet, but the materials alone are not what make it so special. The detail that changes everything is the provenance. The ring has a connection to Pugin-Hardman, a name linked to the Gothic Revival movement and the history of British design. Augustus Welby Pugin was an important figure in Gothic Revival, where design was not limited to grand architecture but extended into even the smallest objects. After Pugin's time, the Hardman family continued this tradition through metalwork, stained glass, and religious pieces. So this ring is not simply viewed as gold with a gemstone. It is a combination of craftsmanship, faith, and a very specific design history. An antique garnet ring can be found, but a decade ring with the Pugin-Hardman background, story, and rarity is something completely different. That is why the expert was not only valuing the materials, he was valuing a piece of history captured inside a small ring.
So, without a shadow of doubt, it's worth £8,000.
Oh my God. Fantastic. Oh, that dear little ring.
£8,000 for one small ring, a number that the owner could hardly believe. But after understanding the story behind it, the size was no longer the most important thing. Because this ring does not impress through sparkle. It impresses through depth. Through 10 tiny prayer beads, 22-karat gold, Pugin-Hardman provenance, and a connection to an important period of British design. For collectors, that is something almost impossible to replace. An object that is not only worn on a finger, but also preserves traces of faith, family, and history. And sometimes in the world of antiques, the most special treasures are the small things that many people would easily overlook. At first glance, this appears to be nothing more than an old writing desk worn by centuries of use. There are no elaborate carvings or dramatic features demanding attention. But experienced appraisers know that the most understated pieces often hide the greatest stories. And the moment this bureau desk was opened, a remarkable journey stretching back more than 300 years began to unfold.
This piece of furniture was made about 1720, and I think it was made by a cabinet maker who was already well established because he was using materials which were fashionable 20 years earlier.
Crafted around 1720, this bureau desk comes from one of the finest periods of English cabinet making. What impressed the expert was not simply its age, but the confidence of the craftsman behind it. Rather than following the latest fashion, he continued using materials that had been popular decades earlier, a choice that reflected the assurance of an established master. At the time, bureau desks served as both writing tables and secure storage for important documents and correspondence. But the most fascinating part of this example was still hidden from view.
There it is, the well, which of course was accessible only when you open the top. Secret papers and so forth inside. But in here you have laburnum veneer.
Beneath the writing surface lay rare laburnum veneer, a material seldom found in surviving furniture of this period. Combined with Burr-Yew, walnut, and exceptionally precise veneering, it revealed the extraordinary skill of its maker. Even after more than 3 centuries, the craftsmanship remained remarkably well preserved. Yet the appraiser still had not reached the discovery that excited him the most. One hidden drawer was about to reveal an even more personal connection to the past.
There's a secret drawer. We've got to have a look at that because this is a very unusual feature. You see that pop out?
Yeah.
The man that wrote that was working in 1720. I mean, it's magic.
I've never seen
Absolutely
that.
wonderful.
Inside the secret drawer were pencil marks left by the original cabinet maker while assembling the desk in 1720. They were nothing more than simple workshop notes, yet they created an extraordinary connection between the craftsman and the person opening the desk more than 300 years later. Authentic details like these are exactly what collectors hope to find. By this point, only one question remained. What value would be placed on a piece carrying so much history?
Altogether, a quite exceptional piece of furniture which is still usable today. It looks beautiful today. It's a specialized piece. And to replace it, you'd have to think somewhere in the region of 15 to 18,000 pounds.
Valued at between 15,000 and 18,000 pounds, this bureau desk proves that the worth of an antique extends far beyond its age. Its hidden compartments, rare veneers, and even the cabinet maker's original pencil marks have preserved a remarkable chapter of English furniture-making history. That is why, after more than 3 centuries, this desk continues to impress both experts and collectors alike. Folk art root sculpture. Continuing the countdown is a piece that was not made from bronze, precious stone, or any expensive material. At first glance, it simply looks like a twisted tree root with unusual shapes. There is no signature and no famous artist attached to it. But the moment the owner saw it, she knew this was not an ordinary object.
I think I started to dance around, and my niece describes it as the happy dance because it was something so peculiar that I knew it was special.
A piece of folk art has to have a lot of things going for it to be great. It has to draw you in.
Yes.
And that's exactly what this does.
Before it was discovered, the piece had been sitting in a garage in South Jersey for years. No one knew exactly who created it or what its original purpose was. But in the world of folk art, the most important thing is not always a famous name. It is the imagination and ability to turn ordinary materials into something completely unique. From the natural roots, the maker found the shapes of snakes, birds, cats, and other creatures hidden inside. And the longer people looked, the more details they discovered.
It has a great old finish on it, and it's kind of like those spooky trees in the old tales. It fascinates me, it drives me crazy, and it kind of scares me too.
That strange mix of fascination and mystery is what makes this piece special. It was not designed to look perfect or traditionally beautiful. Instead, the artist kept the natural twists and forms of the roots, transforming them into their own world. Experts believe the piece was likely created around 1890 or 1900. Despite some signs of age, its condition and incredible detail made it an impressive example of folk art.
There's a little bit of wear up here, but I tell you something, to a non-folk art person, this is probably ugly as a mud fence. But to the people that collect folk art, it's a thing of great beauty. So much detail.
This is exactly the kind of artwork that can divide opinions. Some people may only see a strange piece of wood. But for folk art collectors, that originality and personality are what create its value. No two roots grow the same way, making this sculpture almost impossible to recreate. That rarity led to a surprising valuation.
And as far as value is concerned, we really agonized over that part of it.
Okay.
I would say a good auction estimate would be $30,000 to $50,000.
That's incredible.
From a tree root forgotten in a garage to an estimate of $30,000 to $50,000, Its value did not come from the original material. It came from the imagination of an unknown artist who saw something extraordinary where others may have seen nothing. A strange sculpture, but that uniqueness is exactly what made it unforgettable.
Well, it belonged to my great-grandfather, and it came down through the family.
Now, this is a watch made for the Chinese market. And there was an entire industry in Switzerland centered in the town of Fleurier, which produced, in the early part of the 19th century, watches that were sold exclusively to a Chinese market. Typically, they have this wonderful floral enamel on the back, but yours is more special than that. Now, we can turn this over and look at the other side of the watch. When we first saw the floral enamel, you saw the pearls around the outside of it. This once had pearls around it too. And I understand this has had sort of a sad history.
That's correct. It was confiscated by the communists during the Cultural Revolution, and when it was returned, the pearls were gone.
How did you get it back after the Cultural Revolution?
It was returned to my family, and it came down through my mother.
But the most surprising part of this watch is that even after losing part of its original decoration, what remained inside was far more important than the missing pearls, because this was not just another Swiss pocket watch. It was an automaton watch. And at the time it was created, this represented one of the most complicated and luxurious forms of watchmaking that craftsmen could produce. Unlike ordinary watches that were only designed to tell time, an automaton contained an additional mechanical system hidden inside the case, allowing small figures or decorative elements on the watch to actually move. And all of this happened without electricity, batteries, or modern technology. Every motion depended entirely on tiny gears, springs, and precisely engineered components working together. Even creating a simple movement required an extraordinary level of skill. That is why antique automaton watches have become some of the most fascinating pieces for collectors. But there was another layer that made this example even more special. It was made in Fleurier, one of Switzerland's important watchmaking centers during the 18th and 19th centuries. The workshops there became known for producing highly decorated luxury watches, especially pieces created for the Chinese market, where wealthy collectors admired elaborate Western mechanical creations. These watches were not only expected to be accurate, they had to amaze people. Swiss craftsmen combined complicated mechanical movements with colorful enamel work, precious materials, pearls, and animated scenes, transforming a small timepiece into something closer to a miniature piece of art. And that is why the loss of the original pearls did not erase the true importance of this watch. The automaton mechanism remained, the craftsmanship remained, and the history behind it remained. For collectors, a piece like this represents much more than traditional Swiss watchmaking. It captures a period when craftsmen were pushing mechanical art to its limits, creating tiny machines that could surprise people purely through movement and engineering. After more than 2 centuries, and after surviving such a difficult journey, the fact that this watch still existed at all was already something remarkable.
We think that if you had to insure it, you should think in terms of $35,000, perhaps to $40,000. It's quite a nice watch, and you should be very happy that it survived, and I'm delighted to hear the story of the watch.
Thank you.
Ancient Egyptian alabaster canopic jar with IMSETY head. Continuing the countdown is a jar that was not created for everyday life. Its appearance may look like an ancient decorative object, but its true purpose was connected to one of the most important rituals of ancient Egypt. For years, the family only knew it as something their grandfather purchased during his travels. But they had no idea they were keeping an artifact with thousands of years of history.
My grandparents traveled extensively pre-war, and obviously ended up in Cairo at one point. And my grandfather, who loved to collect beautiful things, bought this, the canopic jar.
Yeah, well, I collect scarabs, but I've never had the luck to find one of these.
The grandfather bought the jar for its beauty, but ancient Egyptians created objects like this with a much deeper meaning. Canopic jars were used during mummification to protect the important organs of the deceased. Each jar in a set of 4 represented one of the sons of Horus, serving as a guardian for the journey into the afterlife.
But as you know, as you've just said, it's a canopic jar. And you probably know, these jars were put in the tombs of embalmed bodies with the embalmed vital organs inside each one of them, because there were 4.
The human-shaped lid shows this figure is IMSETY, the protector associated with the liver. But the value of the jar came from more than just its age. The alabaster material, craftsmanship, and especially its clear ownership history all made it more significant. The family even kept the original receipt from Cairo, an important detail for an artifact thousands of years old.
This is the receipt, isn't it, for it?
Yes.
From what date was this?
The receipt helped prove that the jar had been in the family since before World War II. For Egyptian antiquities, provenance like this can make a major difference. After examining it, the expert identified the piece as likely coming from the 19th dynasty, an era connected with famous pharaohs such as Ramesses II. That meant this jar could be more than 3,000 years old.
This type is usually from the 19th dynasty. That's about 1290 to 1180 BC. That's the time of Ramses and Set. So if it's confirmed, which I'm sure it is, that it's from that date, it could make £4,500, and it could possibly make more.
But the most fascinating part is its journey. An object once created to protect something precious inside an ancient Egyptian tomb was eventually protected by one family for generations. More than 3,000 years later, its story continues.